Hi, welcome to the Potter's Roundtable. This is Pottery Shorts, a series of short pottery topics done on the fly. Hi, this is Pottery Shorts. I'm Phil Bernberg. Today's topic is buying a used electric kiln, a cautionary tale. A friend of mine recently purchased a used kiln in great condition at a great low price from an elementary school, and she asked me to help her set it up in her basement studio. The first thing I did when I looked at the kiln was to look at the identification plate on the kiln to get the model number in case it turns out we need to get any parts. And so here's a view of what the plate looks like. This is the information provided on the plate. And here's the problem. The kiln that she had purchased was designed for use with 208 volts, single phase power, rather than the voltage that she has in her house. And so if you look at the kiln, the plate number, the ID plate, it has the model number and it has the serial number and it has 208 volts. And so that's one of the first things to check is and single phase, and it says the amperage and the wattage and the maximum temperature, but the problem was 208 volts. There are two common forms of electrical power. There's 240 volts, single phase, which is the normal case for most residences. But for commercial and industrial use, it's very common to have 208 volts, which is often three-phase. It can be three-phase or single-phase. But the main difference is the voltage, 208 volts for commercial use and 240 volts for single use, for residences. Okay, so the problem was the school that was using the kiln, where she purchased the kiln, was using 208 volts. But her home was supplied with 240 volt service. And what this really boils down to is, if a 208 volt kiln is connected to 240 volts, the elements will overheat very quickly and they can even melt or arc. And the problem is, with that difference in voltage, you're supplying about 20% too much power to the elements. Because as you're probably aware, the elements for electric kilns are designed, the thickness and the length of the elements is based on the amount of power that's going to them that is needed to bring them up to a certain temperature. So in this case, the elements would have been overpowered. So in her situation, basically, the elements would need to be replaced. For this particular kiln, which had 4 elements, we checked, the replacements cost about $60 each. So she was looking at close to $250 to replace the elements in this kiln. The rest of the wiring for the kiln, in terms of the controls and the normal wiring, was okay. Going from 208 to 240 volt, the background for the wiring is plenty, supplies plenty of extra sort of cushion, so there isn't any risk there. And even the plug was the same because it's single phase. As you're probably aware, different electrical plugs are given a NEMA, that's a North American Electrical Manufacturers Association, I believe that's the correct abbreviation. It's a code number which describes the pattern of the plugs. And so that the idea is that you can't plug one type of plug into the wrong outlet and get too much power. And so because it was single phase, both this kiln and a kiln that was designed for her house had the same plug style. That was a NEMA 6-50. If the situation had been reversed, if it had been a 240 volt kiln and she was going to try to use it on 208 volts, there'd be no problem with overheating, because in this case you're supplying a lower voltage than what the kiln was really intended for. So instead of having an overheating problem, you'd have the opposite. The kiln would not get up to temperature properly because it wasn't getting enough voltage. And I ran into this situation while I was teaching at Hood College, and I've seen this at other situations like this. The art department at the college had accepted a donation from a local potter of a kiln. But the kiln, because it was purchased by the potter, was set up for her home studio, so the kiln was designed for 240 volts. So the problem was, and the college was running on 208 volts. So the problem was the kiln never got to the proper temperature because it didn't have enough power to go with that particular set of elements. And the solution, again, was to change the elements. So the moral of this story is, when you're considering buying a used kiln, don't just look at the physical condition of the kiln, that is, open up the lid and look at the bricks or see how, whether the kiln is all rusty. it's really important to look at the ID plate. And so this is the ID. This is showing the ID plate sitting on the outside of the controller box where the power controls are. So, and the plate is usually like a sticker that's either applied to the body of the kiln, or in this case, it's applied to the control box. So it's really important when you're buying a used kiln is find the ID plate, look at the voltage that the kiln is designed to be used for, and also look at the maximum temperature. For a long time, they've been making kilns now that are specifically designed to only operate at earthenware temperatures, or up to about cone 8, or up to about, which would be basically middle range firing, or up to cone 10. So depending on what your requirements are, it's really important to look at this plate, and especially the voltage. Okay? Hope this has been useful. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the presentation, please like it and subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends. This way we get more viewers of our videos. Also, check out our website, www.hfclay.com. We'd really like to thank our patrons for supporting our educational efforts, such as these videos. And if you'd like to consider becoming a patron, go to patreon.com and look for the Potter's Roundtable.